Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions from YouTube, Twitter, and everywhere else and answer them here on this video format. Please make sure you're subscribed and notified so you can make sure you put your questions on the question prompt when I do it every week so you can have a chance to have your question on the show. With that all being said, I'm excited about doing these questions. I hope you're excited about hearing me react and respond to these questions. So let's just get into it, man. First question is going to be from Philip, who says, hey, Q, why is nobody realizing that keeping Baker Mayfield around steals the headlines away from the Watson situation? We could easily get a 6th or 7th round pick if we cover some salary. It's clearly a smokescreen. Okay, this is false. I don't know how many people believe this, Philip. You are probably one of them. But this is false. The idea that the Browns could easily get a Baker Mayfield trade, that's a lie. If that were possible, the Browns would have done it. Straight up, right? The idea that Baker will be an attention stealing from Watson, that is like trying to put a napkin up to block a house when it comes to the Deshaun Watson. Like, it's not even close to anything that would be a smoke screen for that situation. No. Baker Mayfield's still on this team because nobody wants to trade for him. Nobody wants to give up a 6th. Nobody wants to give up a 7th. Nobody wants to eat $8 million or $10 million or $12 million and definitely not $18 million for him. That's why. And part of that reason is because they have hesitancy about Baker Mayfield, because if a team really thought Baker Mayfield was truly a franchise quarterback, they would take him at $18 million and they would run away with it. They wouldn't think twice about it, right? If they felt like that could be the case, truly in their heart. If they feel like it could, maybe, right? If they're hesitant on it and they're 50, maybe he could be good, then they do what they're doing right now, which is wait for him to get cut and then sign him on a discount and take their chances. If they get him, they get him. If they don't, they don't. That's the Baker situation. All the other stuff is just, I don't know. People coming up with whatever to justify why he's still on the market. It's obvious why he's still on the market. Nobody wants him at $18 million because nobody is confident 100% or close to 100% confident that he's a franchise quarterback. That's just the case, right? People are 50-50 on that universally around the league. And when that's the case, they're just going to wait. Next question comes from Algorithm, who says, any thoughts on the defensive line depth? Are Elliott and Togiai going to be 4th stringers? And have you seen flashes of starting caliber play? Jordan Elliott's a tough case because he's been pretty disappointing. Togiai, I felt like Togiai, when he got drafted, he was going to be, at best, a rotational player, which is fine. I still feel that way about him. I don't think he's a 3-down guy. So, I think Elliott's been a little bit of a disappointment. You could definitely say that. But Togiai, I feel like, he still has room to become what he was drafted here to be, which is a role player, right, essentially. So I think that is still possible. Now, where will they be on the depth chart? 4th string? I don't think the Browns are keeping 8 defensive tackles. They usually keep 6. So I don't even think there is a 4th string, or if there are 4th string, there would be practice squad. I think Elliott could slip to the practice squad this year if he's not careful. Togiai will probably be in there battling with Sheldon Day, battling with all the other guys on this defensive line roster that they want to make the team. We'll see where they have Isaiah Thomas and Alex Wright line up primarily. I think they'll probably put them both at edge, but they might put Isaiah Thomas inside and see what they could do there with him. But yeah, that's going to figure itself out pretty soon here, though. Next question comes from Sofrita, who says, at what point do we release Baker Mayfield? We can't keep him forever. Now, I know when some people hear that, they go, well, yes, we can keep him forever. And you can keep him this year. But let's ask this question. Is Baker Mayfield, and just keeping him and hoping you get a future, at this point, a 6th-round pick, is the potential of that 6th-round pick worth a roster spot? No, right? We would all agree. The potential of holding a guy out you have no intentions to play, worth a roster spot, everybody would agree no. Because again, if you keep Baker Mayfield on the team, it should be obvious to people, but I don't think people have thought about this yet because we're not near the cuts. But if you keep Baker Mayfield on this team into the season, like some people are suggesting, you got to cut a good player that can help your team on a win-now situation, we would hope. We see what happens with Deshaun Watson and his suspension. But in that situation, you would have to keep him on the roster knowing you're not going to play him, because even if Watson is suspended for a year, he's not going to play, right? It's pretty obvious they're going forward with Jacoby Brissett if that is the case, because that's what they've said they're going to do publicly. So if that's the case, why would you keep Baker Mayfield on the roster? In hopes that you can get a 4th-round pick from somebody? That's poor use of a roster spot. Because if you're trying to win now, especially if Deshaun Watson gets suspended, think about that. Think about this, man. You would have 2 quarterbacks that would take up roster spots, and I believe you still do take up a roster spot when you are suspended, or maybe you get put on a DNP list. I don't know. But you would have 2 inactive quarterbacks that can't do anything for you on the roster, taking up space. What sense does that make? It makes no sense to me. So no, I think they will probably release him. He's definitely, I would hope he's not going to be on the team past September, right? Because it just wouldn't make sense to hold a roster spot for him. And I think that's the context in which we need to think about this, because everybody else has not thought about that. Is if you keep him in September, he will take up a roster spot. So ask yourself that question. It's not worth the extra roster spot. I know there's some draft guys in there that are like, oh yeah, it might be worth it if you can get it. No, it's not worth a draft pick that you might be able to get. It's just not worth it. That's not what a roster spot is for. Especially when you got 5 running backs on the roster. How is this all going to work? But no, I think if not before September, obviously before September, but I think probably in June, we'll see something shake with that, right? Something's going to shake pretty soon here. I would be surprised if they let this thing roll into the end of the preseason, and especially if they let this thing roll into cuts. This is going to get handled itself. You can't tell all 53 guys, all 90 guys on this roster, that we're only going to keep the best players, the players that compete, and we're going to cut the players that don't cut the mustard, and then tell me you're going to keep Baker Mayfield on this roster, who has not showed up to camp, who probably will not show up to camp, will not participate at all, will sit home and collect his $18 million and then make a roster over guys who have been there the whole time in camp. You can't, that's how you lose credibility in the locker room. And I understand this is a business, but they don't even make business sense to do that. Baker Mayfield is not a trade asset. Nobody wants him. And the sooner we as Brown fans understand that right now, in the current situation, nobody wants Baker Mayfield, then we can, and from a trade situation, right? Somebody might want him in free agency. But as far as trading for him, it makes no sense for any other NFL team to do it. Nobody wants him. He's not a trade asset. He's just a dude on this roster eating up $18 million that he's going to eat up anyways, and there's no way to get rid of it, right? Nobody wants to take that money. It is what it is. We got to move on at this point. But yeah, that's what I think about that whole situation. The next question comes from Kudos, who says, hypothetically speaking, as Baker played a couple of games for the Browns while Deshaun Watson is gone, should we respect and honor his last few games and give him a proper goodbye? He said that he's Big Ben. Baker has not accomplished anything in Cleveland. Did he accomplish more than mediocrity? Of course, right? He was a part of a team that won a playoff game. But we can't act like he won the Super Bowl. We can't act like that. He did not win the Super Bowl. I've seen people ask if Baker's going to be in the Ring of Fame, all of this weird stuff. Baker Mayfield will be like Tim Couch. That's what he's going to be remembered as. Tim Couch didn't get a farewell tour with the Cleveland Browns, even though he was a part of the team that went to the playoffs, right? He wouldn't play in the playoffs, but he was a part of it. Same way Baker was a part of a team that went to the playoffs. It's just, we can't build statues to Baker Mayfield just because he was on a team that was a little bit better than mediocre. Well, not a little bit, a lot better than mediocre. But we can't build statues because he had a good season. We can't do that. That's silly. As far as a proper goodbye, if he throw 4 interceptions in a game, and that's his last game as a Cleveland Brown, he deserves whatever booing's going to come with that. So no. If he plays well, yeah, Good on Baker, man. Way to get a win and get out of here. But if he stinks, I'm not about to clap it off of Baker Mayfield. Like, why would we? Why? You have to earn this respect with your play on the field. Dudes who get this are Brett Favre, Hall of Fame level guys. Or if they're not Hall of Fame, like a Bernie Kosar, perennial Pro Bowl guys in their era, like at least the top 10, right? Bernie Kosar was him. Baker Mayfield won none of that. He don't get none of that. Draymond Green has a great line that he said to Paul Pierce that comes through in this moment as specifically relevant. He looked at Paul Pierce and he said, "You trying to get that retirement tour like you Kobe, but they don't love you like you Kobe." We don't love Baker. Well, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but Baker ain't do what Bernie did. He not about to get that love Bernie got. That just is what it is. Stop trying to make it be like that. It ain't like that. He ain't do none of that. He ain't take us to no AFC championship games. Giving flowers to everybody. I understand, like, if you want to be appreciative of what Baker Mayfield did, which was better than most quarterbacks that walk through here, but understand that doesn't make him spectacular. That just makes us really bad at evaluating quarterbacks over the last 20 years. That somebody walks in, is decent, not great, but decent, and we feel like we got to build a statue to him or clap him off like he's Ben Roethlisberger, a Super Bowl champion or something like that. That's just... We should be ashamed that we feel that way, because that just speaks to the lack of any kind of success that we feel the need to do that. And I don't think that's being disingenuous or that's an Oklahoma fan that said that. I think that's legitimately a Browns fan who legitimately feels that we need to have that level of appreciation towards Baker Mayfield, because this is what it's been. But we need to bury all that stuff and put the bar where the bar's supposed to be. We can't have this bar in the water still. All right, man. That's what. Next question comes from Ian, who says, "There's been a lot of talk regarding the Browns wide receiver and defensive line room. How big of a deal of a concern should the offensive line be?" I feel like it's a fragile position group. I would agree. I think the offensive line has a couple of issues there that we're not talking about. One, every year goes by, we rely on Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin gets hurt. At what point are we going to start anticipating that this is just going to happen throughout the year? You know what I mean? Our swing tackle, Chris Hubbard, he's coming off of 2 back-to-back season-ending injuries. Can we trust that he's still going to be the same, especially at the age that he's at? Which means if Chris Hubbard can't make the team or is severely declined, if Jack Conklin is either declined or not healthy, because he could decline too, then we're relying on at this point, he's old, right? Joe Bitonio, who's not ancient by any means. Like, some guards play till they're 40, but he's old, right? And Wyatt Teller, who was up and down last year. Then you have Jedrick Wills, who's been up and down, but I think he's going to be all right. Nick Harris, who's new, and James Hudson, who was up and down. I think he played well at the end of last year, but we've seen guys play well at the end of a year and then stink at the beginning of the next year, so it's not a guarantee. A lot of question marks on that offensive line. If I'm a Browns fan, and I am, during camp, I'm paying attention to all of the offensive line reps. First team, second team, third team, whatever team, I'm paying attention to it, because I want to make sure that, one, these young guys that we're hoping going to step up, can step up, and two, that they have depth there, because they didn't have depth last year, and the pieces that they relied on for depth in 2020, they're older or damaged. So we'll see, man. We'll see. I think that offensive line, I think we should be a little bit more concerned about it. Not red flag or it's in a bad spot. It's still a good offensive line. But if we're sitting here expecting this to return to 2020 form, I don't know about that. I'm not confident that's going to be 2020 form, and I think that's why you make the trade to get somebody like Deshaun Watson, so you don't have to have the offensive line be that good in order to have any success on offense. Next question comes from Gabe, who says, "Hey Q, been a fan since you started the channel. How likely of a scenario is it that we underperform this season? I worry about how thin our defensive line and wide receiver group. If Coop and MG go down, we could be in huge trouble, not to mention Deshaun Watson suspension." Thing about Cooper is that He don't go down much, right? So I don't get why we would anticipate a Cooper injury and why so many people have been anticipating that. This is a dude who's played consistently. It would be like expecting Jarvis Landry to miss a bunch of games. Cooper's been just as consistent. As far as Myles Garrett goes, yeah, if Myles Garrett goes down, the defensive line could be in huge trouble. But that's going to happen no matter who's on this team if Myles Garrett goes down, because Myles Garrett is the defense. He's the best player on the defense, right? It's like if you have a team with LeBron on it, and LeBron go down, yeah, team gonna stink because he's the team. He's the best player on it. He's what makes everything able to go. So yeah, if Myles goes down, obviously, but I mean, like, what can you do at that point, right? Like, that's not underperforming. That's just having injuries and in some cases suspensions go down for you, right? Like, that's not disappointing. Disappointing and underperforming would be if everybody were healthy, played, and then they won like 7 games. So I don't think that's really super possible. As far as injury goes, yeah, injury is always possible, but I don't think that qualifies as underperforming. It just is misfortune. Pee Wee says this might seem far out, but I'll ask it anyways. The NFL suspends Watson for a long period of time. Can he try to give up his 2021 salary of $10 million and use his year off as time served? No, this is not. No, he can't do that. The next question comes from Darth Buckeye, who says, not NFL related, but what do I think of the Nick Saban, Jimbo kerfuffle? A&M bought those recruits one way or another. Every big-time college does it. It's not to the extent that A&M nailed this season. I have no care about who paid who for what recruits and how much it is and the purity and the sanctity of college football. I don't give a damn about none of that. I actually think all this NIL stuff and transfer stuff has made college football much more entertaining and much more interesting, in my opinion, right? Now I don't got to see Spencer Rattler just sit the bench. I get to see that train wreck at a different school, right? Because of the transfer portal. That's fun for people who spectate and watch this, right? As far as that Nick Saban, Jimbo kerfuffle over all this NIL money, that's fun. Watching these schools, well, not schools, because, this would be solved if the schools cut the checks, right? They would have the control, be able to regulate it. But since they don't want to do that, all this money is coming from other people that they have no control over, the boosters, and they throwing them checks out, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. This is what makes college football fun. Jimbo Fisher out there ethering Nick Saban on a press conference that he called just to ether Nick Saban is entertaining. And you know what? Now I'm going to watch Alabama versus Texas A&M when that game comes up, because I'm trying to see what that's going to be like, right? This is fun for college football. And honestly, I think players being able to access money while they're in college is better for college football, because some players who might feel the need to leave early just to get any semblance of money, even though they're clearly not ready or not going to be drafted as high as they should be, but they feel that rush to leave their junior year just because they need money right now. Now they might be more inclined to stay if money is not that pressing of an issue for them, right? And that makes the game better. As far as parity goes, when anybody tries to talk about parity to college football, to me, like, it's hilarious. It doesn't exist. It's never exist. This whole thing has always been about who has the most money. Now it's who can give the players the most money. I'm not about to be mad about that, right? If we wanted the college football to have parity, then create a league that's like the NFL, where people get rotated in and all that stuff. But as long as we do, the college football does things the way they do with recruiting and all that, it's going to be a non-parity situation, right? It's going to be unfair to a certain amount. And this is just college football unleashed. And this is fun. This is fun. You can't tell me USC putting a super team together. That's fun. I'm going to watch USC. I ain't watched USC in like 5 years, man. So all of this stuff is ultimately, as much as people are going to cry and bemoan it because their poor little school can't compete, or their school's crying that they can't compete, or their little coach is crying that they can't compete. Look, I don't care about none of that. When it comes to major college football, I don't have a team. And even the school I went to, I ain't even that invested, You know what I mean? Like at this point with them over stuff that they've done in their athletic department. So when it comes to college football and what makes it interesting, this is the stuff that makes it interesting. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if college football had another boom recently because of all of this stuff, right? Because it's one thing to have a college quarterback that has a mullet and that's his personality and that's cool. Give that dude with the mullet at 18 years old a Ferrari and $1 million in his bank account, and all of a sudden you gonna see a lot of Deions walking in the building. Like, it's gonna be interesting to see how all of this goes down, how interesting all of this is. You know, I think it's better for college football that this is going down like this. It's wild. It's unregulated. Look, there's going to be some horror stories in here as well as some good stories when it comes to this. Because this is just straight up an unregulated free market that they got going on there. And whenever that's the case, somebody gets exploited. But at the end of the day, as a product, this is more interesting, right? Than sterile old college football where, you know, ain't nothing wrong and everybody's buttoned up and doing all this stuff. No, this stuff where it's messy and people are slinging mud in public and throwing money out there for recruits, and it's just out there like it was, like you hear them stories was in the 80s with Miami and all that, and the Southwestern Conference. This is the college football that I've heard stories about that I'm actually interested in. Not that sterile stuff where it's just been Alabama at the top for the last 20 years. Now, if you want to beat Alabama, you can spend that money and beat Alabama. And you know what? That's more parity than the last system was, where all you could do to beat Alabama was literally beat Alabama. That's all you could do. Now, hey, you got the money. You can make Nick Saban sweat a little bit. And I find that to be interesting for all parties involved. I'm not a hater of it. I love it. And you can see young players getting paid. I'm not about to be mad. No way. Next question comes from Dale, who says, was the Browns franchise turn around more due to the front office and Baker Mayfield? Come on now. Yeah. I mean, it had to do a lot with what was around Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was a part of it, but he wasn't the whole damn thing. You know, and if people thought that he was the whole thing, somebody would have traded for him. Next question comes from Mikey, who says, Yo, Q, absolutely love the content. I watch every video dish out. Appreciate that. What are my thoughts on a possible Joe Haden return? I want to see Joe Haden in Cleveland. I think he could compete for that slot corner position, but I don't think they end up doing it just because they got enough guys to compete there. It would just be nice to have Joe Haden here, right? Just because he had been on the Browns for so long. I know he did that stint with the Steelers, but he had been on the Browns for so long. He had not won anything. It would be nice to have Joe Haden on a team that could possibly win some games, the same way a lot of people wanted Joe Thomas to be on a team that could possibly win some games because you've seen him go through so much suffering. But yeah, you know, I would love it if Joe Haden could return. I think his value in the locker room would be worth it alone. But, you know, we'll see what they do because there's really no spot for him to play. And also, you know, for Joe Haden, I'm pretty sure he wants to play because he played pretty well last year. So I think he will probably feel like somewhere where he could play would be his best option. I don't think the Browns would bring him in just to have him be a locker room leader. But that's my thoughts on all those questions. Thank you guys for asking them. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.